Greetings, degenerates. St. Michael here, and today I'm going to be tackling a controversial topic, but one that is important to me for theological, political, and personal reasons, because it is the topic that most single-handedly radicalized me, woke me up, whatever you want to call it, and that is the modern-day sacrifices to Moloch, the eugenics-founded infanticide of abortion. First, I'm going to be talking about an article that came up yesterday about a Catholic person in Virginia urging those there to vote against a constitutional amendment that would allow more abortion and also child genital mutilation. After that, I'm going to be talking about the typical arguments that you, I, and many people have heard on college campuses, on political speeches for decades.
I think it's very important, as you have heard from so many incredible leaders, for us at every moment in time, and certainly this one, to see the moment in time in which we exist and are present, and to be able to contextualize it, to understand where we exist in the history and in the moment as it relates not only to the past but the future.
You know, pro-life means you honor life, and that includes the life of the mother. And it includes absolutely making decisions that are in the best interests of women. And so I think this election, this midterm election, is going to have a lot of energy from women and men who don't want the government, don't want politicians like Abbott or someone else coming into their lives, into the intimacy of their relationship and telling them that they have to carry a child to term that is forced birth, regardless of the circumstances.
And I'm going to one by one destroy them. Because, and I can't stress this enough, I don't give a fuck about your opinion on abortion. Right? Left? I've heard both sides of this, and they're both retarded. You know, the right will claim they are pro-Constitution, but then they are pro-abortion, and I will later make the case that those things are completely incapable of being compatible. It's just not. You cannot be pro-Constitution and pro-abortion. I don't care. I'm right. And the left is obviously very much pro-baby death, unless they want to stand on the soapbox that is composed of still warm, dead bodies of shooting victims, and champion that, well, what if we get raped, or what if we get this? You ever notice that it's the women who, either look like Peter Griffin in a wig or have more color in their hair than a poison dart frog, screaming that they need the protection for abortion because of incest and rape? Yeah, no one's touching you without spelunking gear, and I don't really think that's standard issue in a gynecologist, cunt. Ballpark figure was an estimate, not telling you that you need to be the size of Wrigley Field. But anyway, getting into the article here. A diocesan pro-life director urges Virginians to oppose pro-abortion amendment at polls. I'm going to be going just over mainly the quotes about this. Amy McInery, the director of the pro-life or Respect Life Office of Diocese of Arlington, Virginia, is calling for Catholics to vote this month to put pro-life leaders in the state House of Delegates, who she hopes can stop an extreme pro-abortion constitutional amendment from being passed before it's too late. I mean, regardless of what flavor of Christianity or flavor of whatever you are, this isn't necessarily just a Catholic thing. I think Everyone should be voting against this. This is fucking evil. McHenry wrote in an article for the diocesan newspaper, the Arlington Catholic Herald, that the amendment is already 1/4 of the way to becoming law. In Virginia, an amendment must pass the General Assembly in both chambers by a simple majority, and the amendment must pass the General Assembly once more in the session immediately following the general election. If passed again, the amendment heads to the ballot for state residents to decide. Let's look at the quote from her. If this resolution reaches the fourth step, becoming a ballot initiative, we have little chance of defeating it, as 14 other states have demonstrated. She wrote, "Happily, there is hope. The brakes on this train are in our hands. All we have to do is vote our values. Returning pro-life majority to the House of Delegates November 4th will stop this train in its tracks. When the General Assembly reconvenes next January, it's that simple." McHenry wrote that proponents of the amendment claim they are simply adding what Roe v. Wade guaranteed to state constitution. However, the amendment goes far beyond what Roe allowed. She said the resolution gives a right to reproductive freedom for everyone. So I guess, those men that can get pregnant too, which includes minors, and could result in young children obtaining abortions without their parents' knowledge, according to McHenry. That is absolutely disgusting. Including children in this in any way is utterly fucking evil. As if unfettered abortion for all wasn't enough, the amendment's vague language could serve as a Trojan horse to allow children with gender dysphoria to seek surgical or chemical mutilation and castration without parental involvement. What does that have to do with abortion? Even if you're pro-choice and you're okay with baby murder, what the fuck does this additional pork have to do with reproductive freedom? This is just, as it says, it's a Trojan horse. She continued, in addition, the measure might make it nearly impossible for the General Assembly to pass common sense health and safety regulations for the well-being of expected mothers. Henry wrote that the amendment also raises questions around the consensus protections, saying that pro-life physicians could perhaps be required to perform abortions, or taxpayer dollars could be used to pay for the procedures. That is, whatever you think, that is horrible. I don't want my money going to, sacrifices to Moloch. McHenry highlighted that without a federal race on the ballot, voters are less inclined to go to the polls. However, she urges Catholics, and I urge everyone in Virginia, by virtue of our baptism, we must advocate for the common good. For actual common good, not the socialist common good. Each of us must defend the right to life, without which no other rights are possible. And I will get to that when I get to the whole constitutional, 10th Amendment crap. And proclaim the gospel of life with our vote. Well, for all those who are in Virginia, get your ass out there and vote. Because this is beyond abortion. It includes the tranny kid bullshit, which there are no trans kids. There are no trans people, okay? There's normal, and there's people with a mental illness. Don't care. That's the truth of it. But now I want to get into the points that I've heard, you've heard again, repeated ad nauseum about we need abortion for so-and-so reason. The main one, obviously, is my body, my choice. And this has been debunked to the nth degree because it is scientifically proven it is not your body, and the fallacy of equating a fetus, mind you, fetus means offspring, It is Latin for offspring. It doesn't mean a stage. It has become a term for a stage, but it originally just meant your offspring. The equation of a fetus to a parasite is also horrifically disgusting because the growing child in a mother actually sends stem cells to help repair the mother, to help heal and take after the mother within the womb. And this happens, mind you, not only whether or not the child is delivered or not, but it also happens after. It continuously works to heal the mother. Parasites don't do that. At best, a parasite will keep you alive long enough to feed off of you, but it continues to do damage. Parasites and parasitism is a form of symbiosis where one creature has no regard for your health as the host and just wants your resources. That is not the same thing. Not only that, but science has shown that the moment of conception, the very moment a egg selects a sperm, because it's not the idea that it's the fastest. That is another myth. The egg selects the sperm. That goes into the idea that we're all purposely here. We're all chosen. For whatever reason, that's for you to decide, and you can use your free will to live up to your potential, or you can use it to be a psychopath. The choice is yours, right? For various factors that are also in play. There's the idea of nature versus nurture. I think it's far more nurture than it is nature, because the child of Charlie Manson could have been a saint, whereas the child of, Mother Teresa, and I know there's a lot of controversy with her, but at least the facade of Mother Teresa could have been an absolute scumbag serial killer. So I believe far more in nurture over nature, but there is both. The egg is selected, which means you are purposely here. You were chosen. You aren't random. You aren't some flip of a coin. Oh, you just happen to be born in this time. You just happen to be born in this country. No, you're here for a reason. What that reason is, again, for you to find and decide. But the moment the egg selects the sperm, there is a new DNA chain made up of half mom, half dad. How the DNA works takes from both. But that DNA chain is completely unique. It is not the mom's, it's not the dad's. It is entirely this new entity. And everything that little entity will become one day is in that DNA code, is in that strain of DNA. Hair color, eye color, height, disabilities, all in that DNA chain. That is not your body. Not only is it not your body, but that little thing, 22 days, has a heartbeat. Think about that for a second. Less than a month of egg meet sperm, there's a heartbeat. So right off the bat, that is a life. It's a heartbeat. Now, a lot of people will, what about, stillborns and, complications later on? First of all, we have immense medical science in America, especially. Thank God I am a result of such, because I was born, or I was in my mom, upside down. I was in a very detrimental position to both me and her. I was also the result of a premarital adventure. And my actual, I call him, sperm donor was a piece of shit. An absolute scumbag piece of shit that tried to forge my mom's signature to take me from her and leave me in another state. My mom, by God and by her family, escaped. A sort of Moses and Holy Family-esque pilgrimage to where I am now. And again, by God, she found someone who I genuinely call my dad, who I'm his. End of discussion. There's nothing else. And I have a brother. You know, so he has an actual lineage. I'm still part of it. I had every opportunity to not be here. That is why this topic is very, very important to me. And why it's very disgusting to see the same old, tired cliches of my body, my choice. It's not. At 22 days, there's a heartbeat. At 22 days, you are ending a life. I mean, you're ending a life at all. It's DNA. DNA is the most fundamental, bare bones, distilled version of what life is. Like, we spend trillions of dollars trying to get to Mars for bacteria. Single cell, mind you. A single cell creature. But when it's here on Earth, multiplying and growing, we just scoop it up, chop it up, as if it's something to be gotten away, like a cancer. No. It's hypocrisy. Utter hypocrisy. Now, the other main discussion is what about rape and incest? Okay. Those are two horrible things I don't wish on anyone. But let's keep in mind, between 97 and 98% of abortions are the I don't want it crowd. They're not the, victims of a horrible crime or, Ilhan Omar-esque relations. They are, I opened my legs and I didn't demand the man wear protection, or I didn't demand he hold off and earn me. He, just let him in. You just let anyone cross your border. And again, there's a bit of a topic for, again, a dating video later on, maybe. So, well over half, almost the entirety of abortions are done to women who are like, I don't want it. I don't want to own up. Because, accountability to a feminist is a cross to a vampire. Cliche, but you get the point. Now, let's look at the other 3 to 1% of abortions are life of the mother, incest, and rape. Now, again, life of the mother, maybe if we were in the 1800s, maybe you would have that case. But medical science is gone so far that is not enough of a reason. And for you to stand on 0.5% of women who go through problems and champion that as a reason for you to sleep around and be a complete hoe and then not have the consequences come to bite you in the ass is evil and disgusting. Okay, but let's look at incest, because I always found it weird that they differentiated incest and rape. Why? Because wouldn't most incests be just rape? Why are you distinguishing incest from incest rape and then just rape? So what you're saying is because these, cousins, brothers, whatever, who made an adult decision. We're all about that. We're all about, you can't knock who you love, right? Love is love. Let's let them make their own choices. They made their choice to fuck and unfortunately, get pregnant. So what you're saying is the child, as a result of that, because the parents are related, doesn't deserve life. That's a weird argument to make. You're making the case that because the child is of incest conception, they are not valuable? And I'll get into this with Margaret Sanger in a bit, but the entire point of abortion hinges on the idea that life is not innately valuable, which is completely anti-biblical, completely anti anything Christian. So if you claim to wear any of these crosses and you are okay with this in any way, I'm sorry, you're excommunicated in my eyes. Because if you don't have innate life value to it, then you're a number. You're a statistic. You're property of the state. And if the state doesn't like you, well, you get genocide. And it's an obvious thing to make. It's an obvious, low-hanging fruit, but the Holocaust. I mean, the entire final solution was actually inspired by Margaret Sanger's racist eugenics policies. She actually hung out with the guy who coined the term eugenics, who was, I believe, the cousin, I could be wrong, the cousin to Charles Darwin. Think about that for a second. In only a couple decades, we went from mankind are monkeys to let's exterminate 6 million people. That is how fucking insane it is and how quickly we can devolve as a species. To go from let's remove God and, we're just random chance and, apes, to let's load up people on trains and stick them in gas chambers. And Margaret Sanger was an avid fucking racist. She wanted black people removed from society. That was the entire point. She called them weeds and needed to be, cut. This is Margaret Sanger, founder of Planned Parenthood, by the way. Massive racist, massive eugenics pusher. Back to the incest thing. So an incestuous relationship leads to a baby, but that baby doesn't deserve life because brother fuckers and sister fuckers. Okay. But now let's get to the one that's going to cause a lot of controversy. Rape. You would think that if any situation that would result in a baby that required an abortion, this one would be the one where everyone would be like, okay, that's cool. You were a victim of a horrible crime. But I'm here to tell you, no, I don't care. And I'm not bending on this. This is the topic that radicalized me the most, and this is the one I want to talk about the most. Because even rape is not an exception. Now, I will add a preamble of this. I do not think that the woman who, through no fault of her own, received one of the most horrific crimes done to her should have to be forced to raise the child. She can if she wants. Now, there's problems because she will most likely see that child and think, see the face of her abuser and unfortunately maybe cause abuse to that child. So I think it's within the child's best interest that if the woman doesn't want to put this thing up for adoption, there's your choice right there. Right there. There's your choice. She has the choice to let the child, be raised by her and give a better opportunity, or give it up to someone who will. Because there's hundreds of people waiting in lines that want to adopt. Which, mind you, is a Christian historical event. Some of the earliest forms of abortion we all know is, story of Moloch. What they would do is they would have these fertility orgies as a celebration to their goddess, and the resulting child will be put on a pyre and put on a bronze statue and burned on a pyre. Drums drown out their screams. I watched the movie Nefarious a couple years ago, and he talks about this. There's a really descriptive scene in it. I recommend that movie, where it basically says we've changed the temples for doctors' offices, and that's for priestly robes for doctor gowns, right? For scrubs. But going back to rape, well, why wouldn't rape be considered a just cause for an abortion? Well, and I'm going to get to this with the constitutional people in a second, because if you're pro-constitution and pro-abortion, you're a contradiction. Because now, and I always, for a small tangent, I always found it funny that the people that are often pushing women to be more promiscuous, more whorish, dance around in your underwear at 1 a.m. alone in, ghetto cities. They're also the same people that are weirdly trying to take your guns. Like the one thing that would make a rape victim not a victim. The one thing called the great equalizer. The one thing that 120, 130, whatever pound woman could do to defend herself against a man twice her size. Because that's what you're going to do. If you're a predator, you're going after weak prey. That's why I find it funny that these women that look like Peter Griffin in a wig are screaming about being potentially raped. No. No, again, no one's touching you. You're fine. Okay? But that woman didn't face a crime, or didn't commit a crime. The man did. The man did a horrific crime for which he should be executed for. And I've done a video on that as well. I've done a video about that discussing, people, those kind of crimes. There's nothing wrong with wanting them executed. And go check that out. He should absolutely be executed. And I don't mean life in prison. Because if you think about it, if you put this man in prison, right, he's essentially living off the victim's dime. Because think about that. The taxes that she pays goes to fund prisons. So you've essentially made the victim a hoe and the rapist a pimp. Because her money that she has to have taken out of her paycheck every week or every month or whatever is now spent to house, clothe, feed, and guard him. Think about that. What's more loving and caring? Executing a rapist? Or allowing them to live off the victim's dime? I think that's horrible. I think that's absolutely horrible. Again, you've turned the rapist into a pimp. But now let's get to the baby. What crime did the baby commit? Seriously. What crime? Because if we're going to concede that this is a life, which it is, what crime did the baby commit that would guarantee them a death sentence? I hear nothing but crickets. Because it didn't. It wasn't even involved. It was still separate things. It was still two pieces that were, separate, the egg and the sperm. So, what crime did it commit? Well, if you think about this illogically and narcissistically, the only crime it committed is essentially trespassing, being where it's not wanted. Now, trespassing isn't a crime worthy of death. Now, you can obviously be shot for home invasion, and again, I'm all for that. But if you're apprehended alive, that's you get jail. You don't get executed for trespassing. But if you do not believe in the innate value of life, you've essentially just ripped this person's existence away from them. So you can essentially create an abortion, which is nothing more than a communist kangaroo court where the woman is the judge, jury, and the doctor is the executioner. What's the crime? Trespassing. What is the punishment? Execution. Because when there is no such thing as rights, any crime is worthy of death. This is why I'm not a monarchist or I'm not a communist. The flaws in our system are kind of Razorfish put it this way. I think the bugs in our system are standard practice in theirs. So there's that. But that's what an abortion is. It's a kangaroo court. You committed this crime. You have no say. You have no repercussion. You have no fight back. So I get to say what your punishment is. And this is where I get to the constitutional people. Because I know people that are very much pro-American, very much pro-Constitution, but they're also pro-choice. And I think that's absolutely horrible, absolutely retarded, and absolutely hypocritical. Because if you remove the very concept of innate life, that means this is not a person, which means this is not an American citizen, meaning they now no longer have constitutional rights. You have removed 10 rights from this person to stand on the 10th Amendment. In order to get to the 10th Amendment to justify abortion, you have to ignore the other 9 that this potential American is entitled to. Because you have removed its ability to enact grievances, which is what the First Amendment is in part for. You have removed their Second Amendment, which is physical defense against harm. You have removed their ability to have their own property not molested. You have removed their fair trial. They don't get to stand trial. They don't get to see their peers. They don't get to see a attorney and say, hey, I don't exactly want to die. I didn't do anything. I'm just here as a result of mom and dad doing something, or dad being a scumfuck, being a rapist. And most importantly, you have removed their ability to have a punishment fit their crime. So if they have not committed a crime worthy of the death sentence, they do not deserve it. So you have essentially ripped away the entire Bill of Rights from this person to stand on the 10th Amendment, to promote somehow freedom of choice and states' rights. Fuck off. Fuck off. You dare say you're pro-Constitution and dare say you're pro-American, and you deny the rights of actual Americans. Potential or not, they are human life. And the thing is, the Bill of Rights is not necessarily just an American thing. It's just America is the only country that recognizes it as valuable. The ability to speak your mind, to defend yourself, to have representation so that you aren't wrongly imprisoned or killed is something that is innate. And that only happens if you have an innate idea of life has value. And I'm sorry, that's not a Buddhist idea. That's not a Hindu idea. That's not a Muslim idea. That's not a secular atheist idea. That is a Christian idea alone. End of story. And that is why you have these kangaroo courts, as I say. They're evil. They're communistic. And they're indefensible. There is no justification for an abortion. And I once thought of a way to explain it, and I kind of got the idea from a Bill Burr joke. He talks about, if you pull a cake too soon out of the oven and throw it on the ground, you've ruined a cake. And I thought that makes sense, but I kind of took that and I came up with my own. If you were to lay out all the ingredients of a soup, say you're making chicken noodle, right? You have your chicken, you have your carrots, your celery, your broth, your pot, everything. It's all laid out on the table. Let's say you took the chicken and you just hucked it against the wall. Did you ruin the soup? No, because you just ruined an ingredient. That's like, ruining one of the 2 ingredients to make a baby separately. You didn't ruin a baby. You just took one of the ingredients and got rid of it. Now, once you combine them, they're no longer ingredients. They're no longer separate entities. They are now soup. You say, well, it's not fully cooked. Sure, but it's still soup. If you were to put that bowl of soup on the stove, let it cook. Say 30 minutes later, you come back, take it off, and you dump it. You've ruined soup. That is abortion. That is 100% what abortion is. And so that's what I have to say on this. There is no defense for it. It is life. It is scientifically shown. It is anti-constitutional. And I don't care. I do not care about any sort of... Now, I'm up for debate. I'm not saying I want to shut down debate, but I'm done with the arguments. I've heard them. I've taken their logical conclusions to their final end, and I thought this over. I'm like, wait, this doesn't make sense. If you really, really think about this, beyond any sort of emotional reaction, beyond any sort of, heartstring pulling, and you really think about this, how can you be pro-Constitution and pro-abortion? How can you be anti-communist and pro-Constitution? How can you be, anti-racist and, how these people that typically fight for abortion, how can they be all the things they claim to be elsewhere, but they don't understand this? Because one thing, especially with the racist part, because Margaret Sanger was a fucking racist, most abortions, or most Planned Parenthoods, were put in, and I would probably assume this is because of redlining, another Democrat policy. They were mostly put in poor neighborhoods, which was essentially just quote for black, because again, Margaret Sanger hated black people. Now, who cares more about women and blacks? The pro-abortion people or the anti-abortion people? Because if you think about it, a healthy population of humanity typically has, or any species, typically has more females than males. So I think in America it's about 55-45. It may be different now, but there's still more females than males. So that means more pregnancies result in a daughter, not a son. Statistically, you would have to concede that. So that means more abortions would then thus be committed on girls. So there's your, pro-woman stance, abortioners. You're killing more women than I am saying that they should live. But again, since they were set up mostly to take care of black people, to get rid of them, the majority of abortions would then be committed on black girls. So who really cares more about people? Pro-life or pro-choice? But that's all I have to say on this. God bless, and may demons fear when you wake up in the morning.
Thank you.